What's going on, Bottom Line viewers? It's Mitch here of the Bottom Line View, and I'm very excited to bring to you another NFL comparison video. And this being the off season, I wanted to relate it to the NFL draft, the NFL draft classes of the past. And one draft class that always gets brought up, especially because it's one of the more recent classic NFL draft classes, is the quarterback draft class of 2004, with Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, and Big Ben Roethlisberger all being drafted in that draft in the same first round to the Chargers, the Giants, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. All players have played for their organizations their entire careers, and these players are very, very comparable. All of them turned out to be very good players. Two of them went on to win Super Bowls, and all of them went on to be top-notch quarterbacks for the past 10 plus years. So I wanted to take their careers and dissect them and break them down and really truly see who is the best quarterback of this 2004 draft class. So how I'm going to do that, if you've never seen a comparison video on the Bottom Line View of quarterbacks, I've done many. I've done Manning and Brady, Brady and Montana, Rodgers and Brady. I'm soon going to do many more. For this video, I'm going to break it down in a few different categories. And by breaking it down into categories, you can see which player is better at what, and what they've been more successful at, what accomplishments they've been able to gather throughout their career. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to take all of the evidence, all the factual information that I have brought to the table through research, through my knowledge of the NFL, and then I'm going to bring you the final solution and the final take on who I believe is the greatest quarterback of the three players. So first, we're going to break down the players in terms of winning. Then we're going to move on to statistics in the regular season. We're then going to move on to the statistics in the playoffs. Then once we get past that, we'll look at career highs. So the player in their prime seasons, what did they look like? Accolades throughout their careers. How many Pro Bowls did they have? How many All-Pro teams did they make? How many MVPs did they win? That sort of thing. Then we'll move on to some of their important records that each player holds. And then at the very end, we'll look at how the players have really been treated in terms of how good have their defenses been around them, how good have their coaching staffs been, and then also we're going to take a look at how successful has each player been in terms of putting up points on offense. That's another important thing that not many people look at when it comes to quarterbacks. How good is this player actually at producing points for his football team? So we're going to look at all those things, and once we get through that, I'm going to give you the final answer on who I believe is the greatest quarterback. Then I'll go down the list, 1, 2, 3, ranking all three quarterbacks. And you can agree, you can disagree, but that's why I'm making this video. So before we start, I want you guys to comment, who do you believe is the greatest quarterback of these three players? Is it Big Ben? Is it Phillip Rivers? And is it Eli Manning? And then once you get through the video, I want to see if your decision changes once I go through all the evidence and then give you who I believe is the greatest quarterback of them all. So, let's go through the evidence. So, starting off with winning. Regular season games started. Phillip Rivers has 192, Big Ben 198, and Eli Manning 214. So that's just there for your information when it comes to statistics. Eli Manning's played the most games, followed by Big Ben, followed by Phillip Rivers. Their regular season records. Big Ben has the most wins of them all with 135 and 63 losses, while Eli Manning follows up in second with 111 wins and 103 losses, and Phillip Rivers has 106 wins and 86 losses. Now, when we break that into a regular season percentage, Big Ben far and away is the best winner in the regular season, with 68% of the time winning. Eli Manning is actually last behind Phillip Rivers, who has won 55% of the time in the regular season, and Eli Manning has only won 52% of the time. The postseason games started. Big Ben, far and away, again, the leader here, 21 games postseason games started. Now, unlike the regular season game started, because every quarterback can start a regular season game, I do not count that towards the tally in terms of what I'm going to count at the end of the day, but the postseason games started do count because the amount of times and the amount of games you do play in the postseason ultimately matter. Eli Manning has played 12 games in the postseason, a majority of that coming in 2 playoff runs, and Phillip Rivers has played in 9 postseason games. Their playoff records, respectively, Big Ben first with 13 wins and 8 losses, Eli Manning 8 wins and 4 losses, and Phillip Rivers has a 4-5 postseason record. Their postseason percentages, Big Ben has 62%. He is second behind Eli Manning with 67%, and Phillip Rivers is 44% in last. Division titles, Big Ben has the most with 7. Phillip Rivers has the second most with 4, and Eli Manning has the third most with 3. Conference championship appearances, Phillip Rivers is last with 1. Big Ben is first with 3, and Eli Manning is second with 2. So that means that in terms of Super Bowl appearances, Phillip Rivers never made a Super Bowl. Big Ben has made 3, won 2, and lost 1. And then Eli Manning has won 2 of 2 Super Bowls. Also, winning 2 of 2 conference championship games. So when we look at the winning category, Big Ben takes it with 7 first place votes or tallies. Eli Manning has 2 first place tallies and 5 second place tallies. And Phillip Rivers does not come in with 1 first place vote, but comes in with 2 second place tallies. So, that being said, after we get past the winning category, the winningest quarterback of all 3 quarterbacks has definitely been Big Ben by a far margin, followed by Eli Manning, and then last, Phillip Rivers. Let's look at the statistics in the regular season. In the regular season, Phillip Rivers has dominated the competition. He is definitely the best statistical quarterback of all of these 3 guys, which is why the conversation is so interesting for Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers started 192 games. Again, more evidence here. 198 for Ben and 214 for Manning. Just again, putting that out there. Yards. Rivers, 50,348 yards. Big Ben, 51,065 yards. And Eli Manning, 51,682 yards. Again, Eli Manning does win this category, but that's mostly because he played a lot more games than the next 2 guys. So Eli Manning does win the yards category, career yards category, followed by Big Ben and then Phillip Rivers, which is kind of the way it would make sense because the more games you play, the more likely you're going to rack up more yards. Yards per game, Phillip Rivers does win that category with 262 yards per game. Big Ben not far behind with 258 yards per game, and Eli Manning far and below these 2 guys with 239 yards per game. Touchdowns, Phillip Rivers is first overall in touchdowns despite playing, 20 plus less games than Eli Manning and 6 less games than Big Ben. Phillip Rivers has 342 touchdowns in his career. Big Ben has 329, and Eli Manning comes in second with 339. So actually, Eli is second in touchdowns. Ben is last, which is surprising, and Phillip Rivers is first. Touchdowns per game, Rivers also wins that, obviously, with 1.78 touchdowns per game. Big Ben, 1.66, so slightly above Eli's 1.6 touchdowns per game. Touchdown percentage and interception percentage, this is how many, or the percentage that the quarterback will throw a touchdown, the percentage that the quarterback will throw an interception. So finishing first in both these categories is Phillip Rivers with 5.3% chance of Rivers throwing a touchdown and a 2.6% chance of him throwing an interception, which is the lowest number. Big Ben has thrown or would throw 5.1% of the time a touchdown. Eli Manning, 4.6% of the time would throw a touchdown. Big Ben, 2.7 for interception rate, and Eli, 3.1. So Eli finishes last in both categories. Phillip Rivers finishes in first in both categories, and Big Ben finishes in second in both categories. It seems to be a trend so far. Phillip Rivers, in terms of statistics, first, Ben second, and Eli last. Touchdown to interception ratio, Rivers far and away the best, 2.06, which has got to be up there for one of the best of all time. Big Ben 1.89 and Eli 1.49. Eli's actually thrown a lot of interceptions in his career. Passer rating, Phillip Rivers 94.8, which is again the best. Big Ben 94, and Manning 83.5, way behind. Completion percentage, Phillip Rivers 64.2%, Big Ben 64.1%, and Eli Manning 59.8%. So again, Rivers, Ben, Manning for the last two categories. And then yards per attempt, Ben does take this category, 7.9 over Rivers 7.8, and then Manning's 7.0. So looking at the statistics in the regular season, Phillip Rivers is the best quarterback. 8 firsts, 1 second. That's dominant right there. Big Ben, 1 first, 8 seconds, basically flipping Phillip Rivers. And then Eli Manning finished with 1 first, which was the yards in a career. Okay, so that's regular season statistics. Now moving on to playoff statistics. Overall in the playoffs, this is a very compelling argument because Eli Manning, to me, has overall been the most impressive quarterback in the playoffs. But the statistics do show that Big Ben is slightly better than Eli Manning in the playoffs, and Phillip Rivers being last in the playoffs. He's not had enough games to really be a threat to these two players. So Phillip Rivers, just getting him out of the way, has played 9 playoff starts, has had 2,167 yards, 241 yards per game, which is actually more than Eli Manning, 11 touchdowns in the playoffs, 1.2 touchdowns per game, touchdown ratio of 1.2, a passer rating of 85.2, 1 game-winning drive in the playoffs, and 1 fourth-quarter comeback. Now, when looking at Big Ben and Eli, it gets very interesting because Ben has 5,256 yards in 21 games. Eli has 2,815 yards in 12 games. 250 yards per game for Big Ben over Eli's 235, so significantly more yards for Big Ben per game than Eli in the playoffs. Ben has 30 touchdowns in the playoffs in 21 games, and Eli has 18 and 12. Eli does throw more touchdowns per game with 1.5 compared to 1.43. His touchdown to interception ratio is far better with 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, while Big Ben is 1.25 to 1. And the passer rating is also better for Eli Manning, 87.4 compared to Ben's 86.5. Game-winning drives is very impressive for Eli Manning. Out of his 12 playoff starts, he has 5 game-winning drives and 4 fourth-quarter comebacks, while out of his 21 playoff starts, Big Ben has 4 game-winning drives, also impressive, and 3 fourth-quarter comebacks. Eli Manning has 2 in the Super Bowl, and Big Ben has 1 in the Super Bowl. So, that's both impressive. Eli, overall in the playoffs, best quarterback. 5 firsts, 3 seconds. Big Ben, 4 firsts and 5 seconds. And Phillip Rivers finishes with 0 in any category for first or second vote tallies. Career highs. Now, when looking at all players, this is extremely even. Phillip Rivers overall is actually last when it comes to yards in a season in career highs. Big Ben is first with 4,952. None of them have reached 5,000 yards. Very close for Eli and Big Ben. 4,952 for Big Ben, which leads it. He got that in 2014, while Eli Manning, 4,933 in his best season of his career in 2011. And Phillip Rivers, 4,792 in 2015. That was his career high. In touchdowns, Eli Manning also finishing second in yards, finishing first in touchdowns. 35 touchdowns in 2015. Big Ben has gone 32 twice, which is his career high. And Phillip Rivers, 34 in 2008. Interceptions, they've all led the league in interceptions, which is very interesting. And they've all thrown for over 20 interceptions in a season, which is bad. Eli has thrown 27 interceptions in one season. In 2013, he threw 27 interceptions. That's by far the best. Big Ben, 23 in 2006 when he was still young. And Phillip Rivers, 21 in 16 when he was on an awful team. Touchdown to interception ratio, Phillip Rivers, 3.1 in 2008, which is second to Big Ben's 3.6 in 2014. And Eli far and below 2.5 in 2015. Passer rating, Phillip Rivers actually has 2 passer ratings, maybe even 3 passer ratings that are better than every player. So Phillip Rivers, passer rating in a season, he's gotten 105.5 2 times. Big Ben had 104.1 once in 2007, and Eli Manning, his highest passer rating is 93.6 in 2015. Not very good. Completion percentage, 69.5. What the hell was I saying there? 69.5 for Phillip Rivers in 2013. Big Ben 68% in 2015, and Eli Manning 63.1 in 2014. Yards per attempt, high. Big Ben, 2 times he's thrown for nearly 9 yards per attempt. Phillip Rivers 8.8 in 2009, and Eli 8.4 in 2011. So when looking at the career highs and tallying it up, Big Ben and Phillip Rivers tie with 3 firsts and 3 seconds, and Eli Manning comes in last with 1 first and 1 second. So overall, when looking at, statistics and career highs, because that's pretty much where it ends for statistics, it's clear to me that right now, besides the playoffs, when you strip that away, which is important, don't get me wrong, Phillip Rivers and Big Ben are in a fight. And right now you would have to give the fight to Big Ben because of his success in winning and because of his success in the playoffs over Phillip Rivers, even though Phillip Rivers has had probably superior numbers in the regular season, but it is fairly close, so you have to give the edge to the guy that did it in the playoffs. Eli probably lagging behind in third, even though he had good success in the playoffs. He wasn't necessarily a lot better than Big Ben outside of 1 or 2 years. He's kind of more of been a quarterback that has gone on some great runs, but hasn't necessarily had the consistency of these 2 other players. Now let's look at the career, moving on from the career highs, going on to the accolades of each player. So this is where Phillip Rivers makes it closer. Phillip Rivers, 7 Pro Bowls to Ben's 6 and Manning's 4. All-Pros, none of them have been an All-Pro, which is shocking considering Phillip Rivers probably should have won an MVP in 2010 or 2009 or one of these years, but he didn't. And Big Ben, never an All-Pro, rare. And also Eli Manning could have been an All-Pro in 2011 considering that season he had. MVPs, again, none of them won an MVP. Super Bowl MVPs, only Eli Manning has a Super Bowl MVP. Big Ben has never won a Super Bowl MVP. Eli Manning has won 2. League leading in yards, Rivers 1, Ben 1. League lead in touchdowns, Rivers 1, the rest 0. League lead in percentage, Rivers 1, Ben 0, Manning 0. League lead in interceptions, Manning has led the NFL in interceptions 3 times. 3 times. Phillip Rivers has led the league twice, and Ben has led the league once. That's all bad. He should never lead the league in interceptions. But Eli 3 times, that's awful. 4,000-yard seasons, Rivers 9. Ben 5, and Manning 6. That's significantly better. 30-plus touchdown seasons, Rivers 5, Ben only 2, and Manning 3. And considering what we talked about before, Ben's high in touchdowns has only been 32. So these players, Rivers and Manning, have thrown for over that, plus they've done it more times. That's interesting. Game-winning drives, Ben has the most with 43. Rivers is last with 28, and Manning is second with 30. Comeback victories, Manning actually is first with 40 comeback victories. Rivers, 24, and Ben, 32. So that's interesting. Maybe I didn't update the Manning thing. I think I did. I could be wrong on that one, so if I'm wrong on that one, correct me, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So, when looking at the accolades, Rivers is first with 7 firsts overall. Big Ben, 2 firsts, 4 seconds, and Eli, 2 firsts, 1 second. So when breaking that down, accolades, Rivers makes it closer towards Ben. Eli is still sort of lagging behind because Rivers with 7 firsts definitely will bump him up in the tally. Now let's go towards more of intangible things, more of extra things, not necessarily statistics, but records, defenses, offenses. I guess they're still statistics, but they're a little bit different. So now when diving into these players, some of their important records, I actually feel like Eli Manning holds the most impressive records of any of these players. When considering it and when looking at all of it, Phillip Rivers, really, I could only get 2 impressive records that I really felt were solid, great records. 2 of them being the touchdowns between a single quarterback and a tight end, which will probably soon be passed by Brady and Gronk. But Rivers' touchdowns to a single quarterback and tight end, 85 to Antonio Gates. Consecutive games with a passer rating of above 120 with 5 in a season. So that's really, really good. Those are the 2 records that I thought were phenomenal. Big Ben, he has some nice ones as well. Most wins as a starting quarterback in his first 5 seasons. That's really good. Lowest passer rating for a Super Bowl quarterback in the Super Bowl is a bad record, but I thought I should put it in there because it's something to consider. Big Ben, and we'll talk about this a little bit as we continue in this video, Big Ben has won sometimes even though he has been the weakness on his team, which is kind of interesting. The most career 500-yard passing games, that's good. Roethlisberger has the most comeback victories, 19, and game-winning drives, 25 through his first 7 seasons. That's good. I would have thought it would have been Tom Brady, but I guess not. It's Big Ben. Wins before the age of 30. Also thought that would have been Tom Brady, but I guess Big Ben did play more seasons before he was 30. So, Big Ben, some impressive records, especially considering they're over Tom Brady. So, the most, especially the ones about winning, I think kind of stick out to me, considering you don't really, you think of Big Ben as a winner, but when you have Brady and Manning and all these guys in this era, you don't necessarily think of Ben as the winningest quarterback before 30 or the winningest quarterback in 5 seasons. You know what I mean? Then moving towards Eli, he probably has the most impressive records. And this is why. He has the most fourth quarter touchdown passes in a season, 15 in 2011. He's tied the NFL record for most game-winning drives in a season with 8 in 2011. He has the most road wins in a single regular season and postseason by a starting quarterback, 10. He has the most passing yards in a single postseason with 1,219 yards in 2011. The 2011 postseason for Eli Manning is arguably the greatest postseason of all time, and I'll say that with anybody at any time, anywhere. It really, really was. Their defense was good, but their defense was not as great as people remember it to be in 2011, which we'll get into in a bit. Eli actually was phenomenal in 2011. Only quarterback in NFL history without throwing an interception in multiple conference championship games. That's more of an interesting fact, but it is interesting and notable nonetheless. So those are the records. In terms of the records, you can take them as you wish, but I think that Eli's are probably the most impressive. Ben's following in second and Rivers third. Looking at the defenses and offenses for the rankings, some interesting things came up to me, more about the Steelers, Giants, and Chargers than anything. Also considering what Phillip Rivers has been able to do that has gone extremely underappreciated, and some of the things that Eli has been able to do. And I think actually when looking at the team around them, it gives the most actually credit to Eli and Rivers and gives a lot of questions towards Big Ben. Big Ben, yeah, he's gone to 3 Super Bowls, but you almost feel like he probably should have won more or probably should have been in more. I know that they've had to play the Patriots and they've had to play, really good teams. They've had to play the Colts. They've had to play Peyton Manning. They've had to play the Broncos. They've had to play the Ravens. They've had to play some really strong AFC competitors, including the Chargers. But you still look at these teams that Big Ben has been surrounded by, and you have to feel like he should have been in more Super Bowls. So when looking at the defenses, Eli Manning has definitely been hurt the most from his supporting defense, believe it or not. In the years that they won the Super Bowl, they had phenomenal pass rushes, but they didn't really have the greatest defenses. In 2007, I think they were a really good defense, but in 2011, they weren't really a great defense. So when looking at Eli, he has had 5 top 10 defenses in his career, but he has had 20 or worse. So 20 to 32, he has had defenses rank in yards or points from 20 to 32, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in his career. So he's had, of his career, he's had 3 more defenses that have been below 20 than he's had top 10 units. So Eli has had to deal with a fair amount, more than a fair amount, of bad defenses. He has had defenses ranked 27 and 31 in points and yards, 30 and 32 in points and yards, 22 and 29, 25 and 27, 25 and 27, 30 and 13, 24 and 25, 12 and 31. He has had top 10 defenses, but nothing really amazing. His best statistical defense was in 2008 with the 5th scoring defense and the 5th yardage defense. Also in 2016, he had the 2nd scoring defense and the 10th yardage defense. He's also had defenses like in 07, 17th in points and 7th in yards. And really, when I think about the early career of Eli, I wonder how much the points actually had to do with Eli himself because of how many interceptions and fumbles he threw and turned the ball over so many times that the defense actually had to deal with Eli sucking at certain points. So I don't totally give Eli the credit for that, but I also have to just consider that Eli has played with some terrible defenses. And I think that's sort of been a myth that Eli has not played with terrible defenses and that he's been carried. I feel like Eli at times has played really well and has carried his team, but at other times has been carried. So it kind of goes back and forth. When it comes to Phillip Rivers, he, for the majority of the time, has been, really, really good. And actually, Phillip Rivers, to me, has been the best in terms of carrying his team with consistency, and really a guy that has, for a majority of his career, put up amazing statistics, really carried his team year in and year out. No matter the supporting cast, no matter the coaching staff, he's had multiple offensive and defensive coordinators change. He's had multiple head coaches change. He's had to move teams. It's really incredible what Phillip Rivers has been able to do. I will say the one spot on his career is the early part of his career. And I understand he's very, very young, but you also have to consider he had some great teams. 06, 07, 08. These teams were really, really, really good teams, and he could have been able to capitalize on these teams, but he was unable to. And basically, since then, he hasn't had the same teams as he would have liked. So when looking at the LA/San Diego Chargers, Phillip Rivers has had to deal with some good defenses and some bad defenses. So his worst defenses have come into 2016, 29th in points, 16 in yards, in 2015, 21st in points, 20th in yards, in 2011, 22nd in points, 16 in yards, in 2008, 15th in points and 25th in yards. But besides that, Rivers has had some pretty good defenses. When you look at 05, 13 and 13, you have 06, 7 and 10. You have in 2010, they were actually the best yardage defense in the NFL. And the crazy part about the 2010 season, I don't even think they made the playoffs. They were a 9-7 team, but they finished 2nd in points, 1st in yards on offense, and then on defense, they were top 10 in points and 1st in yards. How the hell does that happen? I don't know. Some weird things about the Chargers that we've really if you really search their history and really look at their statistics, there's some really strange things that have happened with the Chargers. But that being said, I would say that Eli has had the worst defenses overall, Phillip Rivers the second worst defenses, and Big Ben by far the best defenses of all three players. When looking at Big Ben, he has had 6 different number 1 defenses in yardage or points. He has had a number 1 and number 1 defense in points and yards 3 times. He has had the number 2 and number 1 one time. He has had 3 and 4 one time. He has 1 and 2 2 times, I should say. 6 and 1 once. He's had 7 and 5, 10 and 12, 11 and 9, 12 and 5. Those are all really good defenses. Really good defenses, and you should be able to win with those defenses. When looking at top 10 defenses, Big Ben has had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different top 10 defenses throughout his career, statistically. When you look at defenses that were worse than 20th in yardage or points, not both, just one. He's only had 1 worse than 20 defense in his career, 11th in 11th in points, which is still good, and 21st in yards, which barely makes it. So Big Ben has been carried the most by his defenses of all three players, and that's just a fact. Okay, that's just a fact. It's interesting to consider. You can't discredit him for that, but you can also say that Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning didn't exactly have that same help. So then looking at the offenses, this is also very interesting because we'll first dive into Big Ben. Big Ben, with all the talent he has had on his teams, when you think about the great offensive players, that the killer bees and the great running games and the great offensive lines and the great receivers, whether it's Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant and Juju Smith-Schuster, whether it's Mike Wallace and Antonio Brown, whether it's Santonio Holmes and Mike Wallace, whether it's Santonio Holmes and Hines Ward, whether it's Hines Ward and Plaxico Burress, whether it's Willie Parker or Deuce Staley or Jerome Bettis or Le'Veon Bell. The names go on and on and on, and the great offensive lineman, Alan Faneca, future Hall of Famer. All these great offensive linemen he's had with Pouncey's and who's the left guard on the team now? Right guard, I should say. He's slipping my mind. But the great offensive linemen that the Steelers have had. And then to consider that they have never had a top 3 offense with Big Ben at the helm is very interesting. And then the top 5 defenses, or offenses, I should say, that he has had, he's only had one top 5 defense, top 5 offense. I keep screwing that up. Top 5 offense, and they finished 4th in points. And this is only points. This is not yards, it's just points. So Ben, 4th in points one time. And I don't even know if yards they've made it. So 10th, top 10 defenses, or off. Come on, Mitch. Top 10 offenses. He's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's had 5 top 10 offenses. But when considering all the talent, when considering the great defenses you've had, you would think that you would score more and you would have more points. I don't know. It's just shocking to me. So again, 0 top 3 offenses, 1 top 5 offense. Now, why this is so interesting is because Eli Manning has more top 3 offenses, he has more top 5 offenses, and he has more top 10 offenses. Eli Manning does. So Eli Manning, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 top 10 offenses. He has 2 top 3 offenses and 2 top 5 offenses. So twice he finished top 3 in points. 3 and 3 both times. 8, 7, 9, 6, 6, top 10. Phillip Rivers. This is amazing that he has not had more success in the NFL. Phillip Rivers has had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 top 10 offenses. He has had 3 top 3 offenses. He's had, I should say, 3 top 3 offenses, 1 number 1 offense, 2 number 2 offenses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 top 5 offenses. 7. So Phillip Rivers has had 7 top 5 offenses, 3 top 3 offenses, and 1 number 1 offense. And he is only 4-5 in the playoffs. Now that you could flip it on me and say that Phillip Rivers hasn't been able to get it done when it counts. But when you also look at the losses, I'm actually going to look this up right now. This is a shoot. I'm looking this up right now. Phillip Rivers' losses in the playoffs. I'm just going to look this up. Okay. So Phillip Rivers in the playoffs. When you really consider who he's lost to, you kind of understand. So in 2006, he lost to the Patriots. Do we really need to consider that? Now, he was a rookie this year. That's something to consider. And he had a poor game in this game. So that's fair enough. And they were favored in this game. But this is the Patriots we're talking about. And the Patriots easily could have went on to win the Super Bowl if they didn't give up a 24-point lead against the Colts in the AFC Championship game. In 2008, they lost to the undefeated Patriots, but they beat both the Colts and the Titans, and I think they were underdogs against the Colts. They went into the Colts and beat them. And then when considering, 2009, this was the season after Big Ben did beat Phillip Rivers in the playoffs, but Phillip Rivers threw for 308 yards and 3 touchdowns, 105 rating. So is it really his fault? But that was a year in 2009 where they were underdogs. I believe they were only or 2008, they weren't that great, but they went into the playoffs, they upset the Colts again, and they lost to the Steelers. In 2009, they lost to the Jets in the wild card round, 17-14, or in the divisional round, 17-14. They were probably favored in that game, but then again, this was a Jets team that a year later would go on to beat the Patriots in the playoffs. So, how this Jets defense was great is really all I can say. 2013, this wasn't a very good team. They lost to the Broncos that put up the most points ever. So when you consider the losses, they lost to the Steelers one year when they went to Super Bowl, I think. They lost to the 2009 Jets, which is probably the worst loss they ever had. They lost to the 2007 Patriots, they lost to the 2006 Patriots, and the 2013 Broncos. But he's also had really impressive wins as an underdog over Cincinnati, as an underdog over the Colts twice. So those are just things to consider with Phillip Rivers. He's had amazing offenses, and he's led the way to amazing offenses. But he's never quite got the credit of Ben or Eli. Now, when we finally give the decision on who the greatest quarterback of them all is, overall, it's very tough. Overall, I have to say it's Big Ben, but it really is not by much. I think it's Big Ben because overall he has proven in the playoffs that he can get it done a little bit better than Phillip Rivers. And honestly, if Phillip Rivers to win one Super Bowl, I think Phillip Rivers would be the best quarterback of all three of these players. But Phillip Rivers, to me, is the second best, and yes, Eli is the worst of all three. When we look at all these categories and when I break it down every single which way, Phillip Rivers is the best quarterback statistically. He's the best in terms of accolades. He is the best in terms of career highs. He basically wins everything except for winning and playoff performance, which Big Ben is close enough in the other categories, which allows him to win the overall debate. But for me, I believe that all three of these quarterbacks should be Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Eli being the most debatable, but I believe that all three are Hall of Fame players. I believe that Big Ben is the best overall. Phillip Rivers is the second best, and then Eli Manning is last. That's my opinion on these three quarterbacks. I hope you guys enjoyed this in-depth breakdown of Eli versus Phillip versus Ben. It's Mitch of TheBottomLineView. For more NFL comparisons, subscribe to The Bottom Line View. And I hope you have a nice rest of the offseason. I hope you guys subscribe if you're new, because this offseason is going to be intense on The Bottom Line View. Free agency videos, draft videos, everything, every which way we're going to discuss, and more comparison videos. Let me know what comparison you want to see next. Peace out.